Welcome, my family, to Nightveil Diaries. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know where you are watching from and what time it is there. Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I never thought falling in love could twist into something that would make me question my freedom, my safety, even my sanity. My name's Jason Grant. I'm 26 now, married, a proud dad of 2. But 6 years ago, my life was a wreck. At 20, I was a mechanic pulling long shifts at a garage outside Knoxville, Tennessee. I'd just moved out of my parents' place, ready to finally stand on my own. That's when I met Sierra. At first, she felt like a dream. She was 22, sharp, gorgeous, had this wild passion for music. We crossed paths at a local open mic night. She was singing, I was the guy who fixed the soundboard when it wouldn't stop buzzing. She laughed, said, "That was pretty cool." I thought she was magnetic. Those first couple of months, bliss. She'd surprise me at the shop with lunch, and we'd spend nights tangled in blankets binging crime documentaries. She made me feel like I was the only person on earth. Looking back now, I realized that wasn't love. It was possession. The first crack showed 3 months in. I told her I was catching a movie with Malik, a friend I'd had since middle school. She froze, then suddenly broke into sobs like she'd just gotten the worst news imaginable. "What's wrong?" I asked, stunned. She choked out, "You'd rather spend time with him than me?" I tried to calm her. "It's just a movie, babe. You and I spent the last 5 nights together. I'll be back in 2 hours." She said nothing, just stared at the floor, tears spilling down her face. That was the last time I saw Malik. Not because he stopped calling, because I stopped picking up. Sometimes it wasn't so dramatic. Sometimes it was subtle. If I didn't text back fast enough, it meant I didn't care. If I came home 5 minutes late, she'd snap, "Were you seeing someone else?" At first, I reassured her. Then I started brushing it off. Eventually, I lied just to keep the peace. And somewhere in that blur, I realized I was afraid of her. I tried to end things once, about a year in. We were at her apartment. Rain tapped against the windows. I said quietly, "I don't think this is working anymore." She blinked, went still. Then her voice dropped. "So what? You're just going to leave me like everyone else?" I sighed. "Sierra, I'm not trying to hurt you, but it's toxic. We both need space." Her face hardened. "Toxic? You make me this way." She laughed, bitter and sharp, then stormed into the bathroom. I thought she needed to cool off until I heard the scream. I rushed in. She was clutching a razor. A shallow scratch bleeding down her thigh. Not deep, but deliberate. She stared at me and whispered, "You see what you do to me?" I stayed. For 6 more months. Every time I tried to leave, she escalated. Panic attacks, suicide threats. Once she called my mom sobbing that I'd abandoned her. Another time she sent photos of her wrists smeared with ink to look like blood. I hated what I was becoming. Quiet, anxious, cut off from everyone. Nobody would have believed me anyway. She wore her sweetness in public like a mask. Then everything shifted. I was wandering Hamilton Mall on a rare day off when I ran into Emily, an old girlfriend from high school. We'd ended on good terms. She spotted me across the food court, called my name, and we fell into easy laughter like no time had passed. When she asked how I'd been, I spilled everything. Emily listened, really listened. She didn't say, "Just leave." She didn't minimize it. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Jason, she's emotionally abusing you. If you don't get out, she's going to take everything from you. And if you're scared she'll hurt herself, tell someone. Don't carry that alone." Those words stuck like glue. So I made a plan. One Friday, while Sierra was at her bakery job, I packed my essentials and called my cousin Brett, who agreed to take me and my 2 dogs in. Then I texted Sierra, "Can we talk over dinner? I think we need to have an honest conversation." She agreed. We met at a small Italian place. She looked nervous but calm. I didn't drag it out. I said, "I'm leaving, Sierra. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I've moved out and I think we both need to grow separately. Please don't hurt yourself over this," I said, my voice shaking. She froze. That smile, the one that had lured me in months ago, cracked. "You're serious?" "Yes, you bastard." She stood abruptly, knocking her water glass across the table. The liquid spilled and pooled on the floor. Without another word, she stormed out. That night, I packed what little I could and moved in with Brett. My mom called, voice tight with worry. My dad stayed quiet but said he'd help if things got messy. Brett's girlfriend looked nervous about the drama following me into their home, but I promised it would be temporary. It wasn't. 2 nights later, 3:01 a.m., pounding on the door woke me. Cops. Are you Jason Grant? Yes, sir. We have a report filed against you by a Miss Sierra Lane. She claims you assaulted her and stole cash from her apartment under threat of a weapon. You need to come with us. I stood frozen, words gone. They cuffed me before reading my rights. Downtown, I sat in a cold, fluorescent-lit room, the kind that makes your bones ache, while a detective asked the same questions over and over. Where were you between 8 p.m. and midnight 2 nights ago? With your cousin? You can call him, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We were playing video games. I haven't been to Sierra's apartment. I don't have a key, no weapon. They didn't believe me. Sierra had bruises. She had a story. She had tears. I had alibis, GPS records, receipts, DNA evidence. 2 weeks in county jail. 2 weeks staring at cinder block walls, silent, terrified, waiting for something to break in my favor. I didn't cry. I just hoped truth still mattered. Eventually, the test came back. Nothing matched. I was cleared. But it didn't end there. Sierra wasn't done. Not even close. Over the next year, she filed 4 restraining orders, each accusing me of stalking, following her car, texting her from burner phones, even leaving dead flowers on her porch. Every time I had proof I wasn't there, GPS, receipts, witnesses, the courts had to investigate. Policy required it. She even hired a private investigator to follow Emily and me. Yes, Emily and I were back together, though barely. She got threatening anonymous texts. One day, her car was keyed. Once, she caught someone photographing her from across the street, but the PI vanished before being caught. Finally, a judge had enough. During the 4th restraining order hearing, he slammed the gavel and said, "This is harassment. The petitioner has presented no credible evidence, while the respondent has shown consistent, verifiable proof of innocence." That was the last time Sierra appeared in court. Soon after, she vanished, moved away from what I hear. Emily and I got married a couple of years later. 2 kids, a home, and finally peace. Real peace, but sometimes a sudden knock on the door or an unfamiliar car parked outside still makes me freeze. My mind flashes back to her, to the fear, the gaslighting, the way someone can twist reality and try to take everything from you. If you're reading this, going through something similar, don't wait for scars or a court date. Get out, speak up. You deserve to be safe. As for Sierra, wherever you are, I hope you find the help you need, and I pray no one else becomes your next victim. I first noticed Isabel during the fall semester of my senior year at Portland Community College. She wasn't in any of my classes, but I'd see her often, slipping into the library, walking past the gym as I headed out after my late lectures. Her face was impossible to forget. She had this quiet, timeless kind of beauty, the kind that didn't demand attention but pulled it anyway. Pale skin, honey brown hair that caught the light like it was spun from gold, and eyes that always seemed fixed on some invisible horizon. She looked like she belonged to another time, maybe even another world. People watched her, but no one got too close. I didn't realize why until a few weeks into the semester, sitting at lunch in the student cafe with my friends. "You know that girl, Isabel?" Tyler asked, nodding toward the big window. I followed his gaze. She was walking across the lawn, a book clutched to her chest like it was an extension of herself. "The quiet one?" I asked. "Yeah." Tyler's smirk was half-hearted, uneasy. "They say she's cursed." I let out a laugh. "What is this, some ghost story?" "No, seriously," Natalie said. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice. 3 of her exes died. Last one was just last summer. Car accident, overdose, drowning, all within 6 months of dating her. "That's just a bunch of screwed-up coincidences," I said, though my tone came out more defensive than I intended. "It's true," Natalie pressed. "Everybody knows about it." "That's why people steer clear. The cops even questioned her after the last one. Nothing stuck, but she trailed off, her face uneasy. Maybe she's just unlucky," I said, though the words felt thin. A chill slid down my back, one I tried to ignore. From then on, I found myself noticing her more. Maybe it was the rumors, or maybe it was just her. She always moved through campus alone, eating by herself, reading under the old maple tree in the courtyard. even when the rain misted down. No headphones, no phone. It was like she existed on a different wavelength from everyone else. 2 months later, finals week had me holed up in the library when someone pulled out the chair across from me. "Hi." I looked up, and there she was, Isabel. Hey." She smiled faintly. "You're Josh, right?" I blinked. "Yeah, how do you—" "I've seen you around." Her voice was soft, low, almost melodic. "You seem kind." I couldn't help smiling back. "Thanks. Can I sit here?" "Of course." She set a notebook on the table and started scribbling. For nearly an hour, we shared the space without much conversation, just occasional glances and small smiles. It felt strangely easy, like sitting with someone I'd known forever. When she finally packed up, she paused. "There's a place I've been wanting to go. Would you come with me?" I hesitated. "What kind of place?" Her head tilted slightly. "Not far. Somewhere peaceful. I don't usually ask people things like this, but I'd like to go with you." The rumors flashed in my head, 3 dead boyfriends, but looking into her eyes, all I saw was loneliness and a kind of aching sincerity. "Sure," I said before I could stop myself. Not long after, we started dating. Slowly at first. Coffee at a small cafe, long walks through Laurelhurst Park. She never posted online, didn't even have Instagram. Her phone was cracked and outdated, barely used. She read constantly, mysticism, theology, books on life after death. When I asked what she believed in, she said, "Heaven is real. Not far away, not above us. Very close. Some people can reach it." I thought it was abstract, maybe eccentric, but she said it like it was the plainest truth. And she had this way of speaking that made it hard not to believe, at least in the moment. Despite the whispers and warnings, I fell deeper into her orbit. She was gentle, calm. She remembered everything I told her. Made me tea when I was sick. Held my hand like she meant it. The campus rumors began to feel like background noise. 3 deaths in 3 years, terrible but not evidence. At least that's how I reasoned it. Then came the night at her apartment. It was a small second-floor studio off Division Street, sparse but calming. She lit candles instead of lamps, filled the air with soft, ancient-sounding music. Her shelves overflowed with worn journals, religious texts, fragments of strange philosophies. After dinner, we sat on her couch in the dim light. She stared out the window for a long time, silent. Then, without looking at me, she asked, "Don't you want to go to heaven?" I laughed nervously. "What?" Her gaze stayed fixed on the dark street below. "I do. I've prayed for it for years. And now I know the time is near." A shiver went through me. I studied her face, trying to read her expression. "I asked God," she continued softly, "and he told me the house is ready for both of us." My throat tightened. "You mean, like dying?" She turned then, eyes calm, almost serene. "No, not dying. Just crossing over. He told me the world is too heavy for people like us," Isabel said quietly, her eyes still on the window, voice trembling with certainty. "That's why I never fit in, but he promised we'll be happy there." She reached into her bag, pulled out a small thermos, and set it gently between us. "I made us something. Chamomile, honey, valerian. It'll help us cross gently." My chest tightened. I didn't touch it.
"Isabel."
"What's in this?" She smiled faintly, but her eyes were grave, unwavering. "It's love. I'd never give you anything that could hurt you. You know that, don't you?" I pushed up from the couch, heart hammering. She stayed seated, looking at me like I'd just betrayed her. "You're scaring me," I said. Her face broke, her voice trembling. "I thought you understood. I thought you felt it too, that longing, that ache. I know you feel it. I saw it in your eyes the day we met." I shook my head, backing toward the door. "Josh, please," she whispered, her voice cracking open. "Don't leave me here." "Not again." They all left. They didn't understand. "But you do. I know you do." I opened the door. She stood then, tears streaming down her cheeks, and shouted after me, "We are citizens of heaven." I ran, I blocked her number, ignored every text, every voicemail. Changed the routes I took to class. Stopped going to the library. When people asked, I just said we broke up. They gave me this look, quiet and knowing, like they had expected it all along, and were relieved I was still around to tell it. 3 weeks later, the police called. They needed me for questions. A man, 27 years old, had been found dead in a park on the city's edge. Toxicology showed a cocktail of sedatives and opioids. He was dressed all in white. When officers arrived, Isabel was kneeling beside him, whispering prayers with her hands folded. When questioned, she smiled serenely. My boyfriend just arrived in heaven. They arrested her on the spot. During interrogation, she told detectives, "He's not dead. He's in heaven. God said the house was ready. I only helped him step through." The search of her apartment revealed stacks of journals, dozens of them, every page filled with prayers, visions, records of crossings. She had documented all three of the previous men in detail, what they drank, how she soothed them, the words she whispered as they slipped away. She hadn't strangled them or stabbed them or fired a weapon. She had simply guided them, coaxed them, ritual after ritual. Until now, there had never been proof. I was summoned to testify. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. In court, when she saw me enter, her whole face lit up, like she thought I'd finally come to follow her. When I sat on the stand, she mouthed, "We belong together." I couldn't meet her eyes. The verdict came back, guilty, but legally insane. They sent her to a psychiatric facility outside Salem, life sentence, no parole. Still, I dream of her. Always the same. She's standing beneath the maple tree on campus, smiling with that soft, distant look in her eyes, hand outstretched. "Come with me," she says, and behind her, glowing faintly against the dark, there's a house. White, radiant, waiting. I always wake before I answer. But every time for a moment I wonder, what if it's real? What if she wasn't insane at all? What if heaven is there and I left her standing at the gates? At first I shrugged it off. A couple of late-night calls, a few texts, the kind of clingy noise that follows a breakup. Annoying, but not alarming. I'm Derek Lyman. I live in a quiet suburb outside Dayton, Ohio, in a rented bungalow with a sagging porch light and an overgrown hydrangea that never quite blooms right. I work for a small software firm. Most days I'm remote, but I go into the office 3 days a week. Nothing glamorous, just steady pay, utilities, and the rent. I met Kara through Rob's girlfriend. They had been in the same community college class, and Rob thought we'd hit it off. Kara was magnetic at first. She laughed like someone had handed her the best joke in the world. Her hair always looked like she'd been pulled straight from a fashion spread, and her green eyes had this tilt that made strangers look twice. I was flattered she liked me. We dated casually at first. Dinner at a greasy spoon, poorly chosen Netflix nights, lazy Sundays with coffee gone cold. It felt easy, small and good. But her casual didn't match my version. Kara wanted the map drawn and the route memorized. She wanted a morning text by 7 and a check-in every couple of hours. If I was slow to answer, my phone would light up until my notification tone felt like a match on Tinderbox skin. "Are you okay?" She'd type. "Seriously, what's going on?" Then, "Are you ignoring me?" She started showing up at my house unannounced, standing on my porch like she belonged there. "I missed you," she'd say, smiling as if forgiven before she'd earned it. I tried to set boundaries. "I need space," I said one night when her face at my kitchen window didn't feel like comfort anymore. She cried, big ragged sobs that turned me into an accomplice to her pain. "Please, Derek," she whispered through the phone. "I don't do well without you." When I said I wanted to stay in, she accused me of seeing someone else. The guilt rolled over me like a winter tide. It's hard to build a wall when the other person keeps bringing sandbags. People ask, "Why didn't you just leave?" I did eventually. Late June 2023, I chose her favorite diner to break things off. Public, loud, purposely neutral. She nodded, almost bored. "Okay," she said, "if that's what you want." She hugged me in the booth and I walked away thinking it had been mercifully easy. It wasn't. That night the texts started. "I miss you. You'll come back. You just need time. I love you." I ignored them. The next day, calls 1, then 5, then a dozen. I answered once and heard sobbing through the line. "Please come over. I can't do this without you." "We can't," I said. "I need space." I hung up. By the end of July, I blocked her on everything. Phone, Instagram, email. I told Rob. He promised to talk to his girlfriend to nudge Kara to let go. For a few weeks, everything quieted, and I dared to breathe. August 2nd, 2023, I came home from work and found my hallway littered with glass. At first I blamed my aging cat, then looked up and realized the front window had been obliterated. Not a crack, but a ruin of jagged panes. My stomach gave way. Adrenaline pushed me to leave, but the thought, what if someone is inside, pinned me in place. I grabbed the small bat under the coat rack and checked the rooms. Kitchen, bedroom, the closet where I kept old programming textbooks and a stack of unpaid bills. Heart hammering like a drummer, I found nothing. No one had rifled through drawers. My laptop sat on the coffee table where I'd left it. The television was still on its stand. Nothing seemed taken. Only the glass was gone. The police took a report which felt like handing over a form and a shrug. No suspect, the officer said. Install cameras. I agreed out of habit, more embarrassed than afraid. At night, though, the house felt different. Like someone had turned a spotlight onto everything I owned and examined it for vulnerabilities. I kept imagining a silhouette moving just beyond the torn curtain. On August 11th, my car waited like a joke at the end of my driveway. All 4 tires slashed. Whoever had done it had knelt and worked with intent, careful not to make noise or get caught on camera. It wasn't random vandalism. It was targeted. I remember kneeling by the wheel, smelling rubber and asphalt, and thinking how close someone must have been to me to know my schedule, to know when I'd be gone. It stopped being coincidence. I wanted to believe Kara couldn't be capable of this. We had shared nights and secrets and small arguments about dishes. Yes, but who else knew the spare key under the potted fern? The nights I left my light on because I couldn't sleep. The way I left my trash can out on Tuesdays. If not her, then who? The question buzzed under my skin like an insect. I'd never had any enemies. No messy breakups, no shouting matches with neighbors, nothing that would make someone want to come after me. The thought that anyone would be at my throat felt ridiculous until it didn't. In a half-panicked decision, I unblocked her number and typed, fingers shaking more from anger than courage. I know what you did. Stay away from me, no answer. I stared at the blank bubble for a long minute and sent a second message, sharper this time. You're going to get arrested. I've already told the cops. Still nothing. That night I slept in fits, a thin, brittle sleep where every noise sent me upright in bed, heart banging against my ribs like a trapped animal. By August 17th, I stopped pretending everything was fine. I installed cameras where the porch could see them, put motion lights on timers, and swapped the cheap deadbolt on the front door for something beefier. I told myself these were practical measures. I told myself I was being cautious, not paranoid, but I was always on edge. I jumped at the smallest late-night creak, kept my phone under my pillow so I could hear it, and slept with the bat I kept by the door within arm's reach. The house felt like a stage set that could be invaded at any moment. At 3:18 a.m., my world reduced to a single sharp noise, glass hitting hardwood. The sound cut through me. This time I didn't sit there waiting. I didn't weigh the fear against the possibility of someone inside. I sprang up, flipped the hall light on, and saw the back window above the kitchen sink blown out. Jagged teeth of glass scattered across the counter and floor, curtains fluttering like torn flags in an indifferent breeze. I didn't even think to grab the bat. I bolted outside, breath catching in white puffs, scanning the yard until my eyes stung. Nothing moved. Shadows pooled under the maple. The air smelled of broken glass and damp earth. The silence felt purposeful. I called the police. They came fast. 10 minutes later, 2 uniforms were knocking on my door. Officer Wilkins, who had a slow, kind voice, and Officer Mendes, who looked like he'd been up too long and was trying to wear patience like armor. They asked the same tired questions. Had I seen anyone? Did I have enemies? Had I been threatened? I answered because I had to. I told them everything again. The texts, the slashed tires, the smashed window. My voice sounded small in the kitchen. This time I begged them to check the house. Please, I said. Just look. I'm done guessing. They went through the rooms with flashlights and careful steps, opening closets, peering behind the laundry machines and under beds. They lifted throw rugs, checked the crawl space. Then Mendes paused at the basement door. What's down here? He asked, his light resting on the wood of the hatch like a question mark. A weird tightness closed over my chest. It's just storage, I said, voice thin. The basement creaked as they opened the door. I couldn't hear anything at first. Then 5 minutes passed, a long, dragging interval where every tick of the house's pipes felt like a suspicion, and I heard Wilkins call up, "Sir, we need you to come down." My legs went jelly. I found myself walking down the steps slowly, each tread a countdown. Halfway down, I saw Mendes standing to the side, his flashlight slicing a cone of light across the concrete. Wilkins had her in cuffs. Kara sat on an overturned bucket, hands behind her back. Her hair was in a messy bun, mascara streaks cutting black down her cheeks. She looked small and brittle in the harsh basement light, like a doll left out in the rain. She didn't say anything. The officers asked me if I wanted to press charges. I didn't have to think. Yes, I said. Every little violation lined up: trespass, property damage, stalking. The fact that she had come inside my house after everything made the risk clear. This was not going to stop on its own. They found a key in her purse, a copied key that fit my lock. I still can't explain how she got it. Maybe she lifted it when she was at my place once. Maybe someone gave it to her. That uncertainty sat in my gut like a stone. Later, Rob told me Kara had been spiraling. Her mother was worried. She'd stopped showing up for work, stopped taking care of herself, replayed old photos of us like prayers. She'd told friends she and I were still working things out, a lie that spread to anyone who would listen. Maybe someone should have seen it sooner. Maybe someone should have stopped it. Kara was put on probation and ordered into therapy by the court. It felt like a tidy ending on paper, but the sleeplessness didn't go away with a signature. I moved across town, changed jobs, got a new phone number, even switched my mail to a P.O. box so my address would be harder to find. The practical things were easy compared to the small, persistent terrors. Nearly a year later, every creak of a window, every unexpected flash from a motion light makes my chest tighten. I triple-check deadbolts. I jump when my mailbox clangs. Sometimes I wake convinced I heard her laugh in the hallway. Other nights I bolt upright from a dream of that cold basement light and the hollow sound of handcuffs clicking. There is nothing romantic about obsession. There is nothing noble about not letting go. Love doesn't hurl itself through plate glass or crouch in the dark under the stairs. Love doesn't shadow your every move until your world is smaller than a room. Sometimes silence doesn't mean a person has moved on. Sometimes silence is the worst answer, because it can mean they are waiting in the dark, watching, learning the rhythm of your life. And sometimes when you think you're safe with the doors locked and the cameras in place, they're already inside. I wasn't searching for love when I left my parents' place and signed the lease on a one-bedroom apartment in the San Fernando Valley. I was 22, working full-time as a plumber for a family-owned business in Los Angeles. For the first time, life felt stable. I had a steady paycheck, quiet evenings, and the independence I'd wanted since high school. My name is Ryan Keller, and I'll never forget what happened that summer. It began on what should have been an ordinary day, mid-June. The heat was brutal, already suffocating by 9 in the morning. I had a job scheduled in West Hollywood, an old Spanish-style home with a couple of busted pipes. Routine stuff. But that's the day I met Melanie. She was 22, just a few months older than me. The house belonged to her parents, who were kind, easygoing people. But it was Melanie who opened the door. She looked effortlessly striking. A faded Pink Floyd shirt, hair tied up in a messy bun, no makeup, and somehow she still carried herself like she belonged in front of a camera. "You want some water?" she asked with an easy smile. While I worked, she hovered nearby, curious about my tools, asking about the kinds of jobs I took, slipping in a question about whether I had a girlfriend. I didn't. At first I figured she was just making small talk, but then she slipped me her number on a scrap of paper and winked. That's when I realized she meant it. We texted that night. One thing led to another. Within a week, we were going out. 2 months later, she moved in. It all happened fast. Too fast, though I didn't see it that way then. At the time, it felt thrilling. I'd never been with someone like her. She was funny, unpredictable, vibrant. She'd leave notes in my lunchbox, send me random selfies throughout the day, cook elaborate meals after my shifts. But soon, that energy shifted. It grew heavy. The first crack showed itself at a small taco joint in Rita. We were eating outside when I got a text from my coworker James about a schedule change. Melanie glanced at my phone and her whole expression froze. "Who's Kayla?" she asked flatly. "What, Kayla?" "She's my cousin from Denver," I said, confused. "You mean the one who sent you a heart emoji on Instagram? I saw it last week." I laughed, thinking she was kidding. "Yeah, my cousin." "You're overthinking it. She didn't laugh. She just stared at me with her arms crossed, eyes hard. That night she went silent. The next morning I discovered she'd deleted over 30 contacts from my phone. Old friends, coworkers, even my cousin. They were clutter, she said casually. I should have ended things then. But I told myself she was just protective, that maybe this was what living with a girlfriend was like. It wasn't public blow-ups followed. At Target, I lingered in the electronics aisle too long. She yanked me by the arm and dragged me outside, screaming that I'd been checking out the cashier. At a friend's BBQ, she accused my best friend's fiancé of flirting with me because she laughed at a joke I made. She'd cry, break things, slam doors, then whisper apologies afterward. I just love you too much, she'd say, trembling. I can't lose you. Please don't leave me, Ryan. By the third month, I was exhausted. I told her I needed space, that the relationship was suffocating me, that I was always walking on eggshells. She looked at me like I'd spoken in another language. Then she hurled a glass against the wall, locked herself in the bathroom for 2 hours, and eventually emerged calm. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go. She packed her bag slowly as though expecting me to stop her. I didn't. Before leaving, she kissed my cheek and walked out the door. I thought it was over. It wasn't. The harassment began the very next night. At 2 a.m., rocks clattered against my window. When I stepped outside, I found no one, just a crumpled note under my doormat. You said you'd never leave me. That week, her car appeared parked down the street every night. She'd sit there for hours, engine off, staring. Whenever I called the cops, she was gone before they arrived. 2 weeks later, I came home from work and froze. She was inside, barefoot, standing in my kitchen, holding one of my mugs like she'd lived there all along. I froze in the doorway, my stomach dropping. How the hell did you get in? I asked. Melanie smiled like this was some casual visit. You never changed the locks, Rye. Did you forget I still have a key? My pulse was hammering, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't want to set her off. Look, I'm tired. I've had a long day, just please leave. To my surprise, she did. She walked right out. But 2 nights later, when I came home, the walls told a different story. At first, it was faint, pencil scribbles, come back. Then red Sharpie, scrawled across the living room, I'll never let you go. And then it escalated into something I'll never forget. Blood. She had sliced her arms open, smeared my name over and over across the bathroom tiles with her fingers. I called the cops immediately. They took photos, filed a report, but shrugged when I asked about an arrest. She was gone by the time they arrived, and technically there was no forced entry they could prove. Their advice changed the lock, so I did. That night I installed a new deadbolt, and the next morning I paid for a security system. But Melanie didn't stop. She shifted her focus to my parents' house in Burbank. One night around 1:30 a.m., my mom woke to a faint tapping on her bedroom window. She pulled back the curtain, and there was Melanie, just standing there tapping the glass with the tip of a kitchen knife, smiling, silent. My mom collapsed in panic, struggling to breathe. My dad called the police, but by the time they arrived, Melanie had vanished again. That was the breaking point. I stopped sleeping in my apartment and moved back into my parents' house temporarily. I silenced my phone, stopped showing up to work for nearly a week. I was drained, mentally, physically terrified. I filed for a restraining order, but those things take time, weeks, even months. Then came the final night, 13 a.m. I remember because I glanced at my phone the moment I heard it. Tap. Tap, tap, against the bedroom window. My heart sank. I pulled the curtain back. Melanie stood there. Pale, hollow cheeks, eyes wide and unblinking. A grin stretched across her face. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Come out, she whispered. Her voice cut through the glass like she was standing right next to me. Adrenaline took over. I stormed out the front door, my chest pounding. Melanie, enough! Stay the hell away from me and my family, I shouted. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. And then suddenly she screamed. A long, high-pitched, broken wail that sent chills through me. She charged, knife glinting in her hand. Instinct kicked in. I swung hard, my fist connecting with her jaw. She hit the pavement unconscious. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, kept the line open until sirens pulled up. The officers cuffed her right there on the asphalt. When they searched her, They found my old house key tucked inside her bra. Along with it, photos of me, strands of my hair, even a torn piece of my mail with my address circled in red ink. It felt like a nightmare, but it was real. Melanie was sentenced to 5 years in a psychiatric correctional facility. The court deemed her unstable, dangerous, in need of long-term treatment. We all tried to erase the shadow she left behind. My parents sold their house. I moved out of the valley, changed my number, my car, everything. Now I'm in San Diego, renting a small apartment, working a new plumbing job. I keep to myself. No relationships, just quiet. But I still don't sleep well. Some nights I wake to the sound of tapping. Sometimes it's just branches or the wind. Still, I always check, because Melanie's sentence ends in less than 2 years. And I know she hasn't forgotten me. I don't think she ever will. I still remember the way her eyes would hang on me just a little too long when she was upset, like she was trying to pin me to the spot. Her jaw would lock up, tight enough that you could see the muscle flex as if she were holding something back. Not words, not tears, something heavier, something darker. Her name was Kira. We only dated for a little over a month, but she left a mark. She was beautiful, no denying it. Sharp cheekbones, wide brown eyes, and this short hair she'd dyed a deep electric blue. She had a habit of tucking strands behind her ears when she was nervous, like she needed to keep her face unobstructed, visible. I met her through a coworker who swore we'd click. And at first we did. The first couple of weeks were actually good. Late night drives with the windows down, our laughter getting swallowed by the wind. Horror movies in my living room, where she'd clutch my arm at the jump scares and then smirk like she hadn't been scared at all. We took long walks in Pine Brook Park, a quiet stretch at the edge of town. There was a pond there, picnic tables, and not nearly enough lighting at night. I liked it for the peace and silence. Kira, though, she told me she liked the shadows. She said it with a smile that was hard to read. But her temper, that was something else. Little things could set her off like a fuse. One night I showed up 10 minutes late to dinner. Just 10. She didn't yell, didn't roll her eyes, she just went completely silent. Not a word for the rest of the night. Another time at a get-together, someone cracked a joke about horoscopes. I laughed, just a small laugh, and she stood up and stormed out without even grabbing her jacket. I kept telling myself to be patient, to give it time, but by week 4 I was worn down, exhausted. She started accusing me of things like hiding stuff from her when I went to visit my mom, or changing as a person just because I didn't respond to her texts within minutes. It was constant pressure, and I found myself pulling back, guarding parts of myself just to feel like I could breathe. Finally, one night she said flatly, "Maybe this isn't working." And I remember saying, "Yeah, maybe it's not." That was it. Over. At least I thought it was. 2.5 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday evening, I got a text. "Kira, hey, I know this is random, but I really need to talk to you. Can you meet me at Pine Brook Park 10 p.m., please?" I stared at the screen for a long time. The smart answer, the safe answer, would have been no, but that's not me. I don't like leaving things unresolved, and honestly, a part of me wanted to know what she had to say. Maybe she needed closure. Maybe I did too. And besides, it wasn't like I was afraid of her. Kira could be intense, dramatic, but dangerous. No, I typed back, "Me. Okay, I'll be there." By 9:45, I left my house and started walking the short distance to the park. It was one of those warm summer nights where the air feels thick and still, like even the world has paused. Crickets hummed in the dark. A light breeze stirred the trees. Everything was ordinary, calm. At exactly 10 I reached the park gates and sent her a message. "Me, I'm here." "Where are you?" Her reply came almost instantly. "Kira, go to the picnic table near the woods. You know the one." I did know it. That corner of the park was darker than the rest, shrouded by trees that made it feel cooler, quieter, sometimes too quiet. We used to sit there for hours talking about nothing, her tracing circles in the dirt with a stick while I leaned back on the bench. The gravel crunched under my sneakers as I followed the path. The moon wasn't full, but it was bright enough to light the way. Soon the path opened into that clearing. There it was, the old picnic table, half covered in dead leaves. "Kira?" I called out. Nothing. I took a step closer. "Kira?" Silence. I reached into my pocket for my phone, thumb hovering over her name when I heard it. Rustling. From the trees behind me, not the soft flutter of leaves in the breeze. Heavier. Footsteps. My stomach dropped as I spun around. A man stepped out of the tree line. He was massive, at least 6'5", with broad shoulders, dressed in dark clothes, his face hidden under a black ski mask. He didn't say a word, just started walking toward me. "Hey, what the hell?" My voice cracked as I backed away. "I don't know what this is, but," he charged. I bolted. Gravel sprayed beneath my feet. I got maybe 10 steps before he crashed into me from behind. The force knocked the air clean out of my chest. My face scraped against the dirt, heat and pain flaring across my cheek. "Help!" I yelled, the word breaking, but his gloved hand clamped over my mouth, smothering the sound. Then the fists came. Hard. Fast. My ribs burned with each impact. My vision went blurry at the edges. I kicked, thrashed, clawed, but he was too strong. "Don't move," he said finally, his voice low, deep, and disturbingly calm, like he'd done this before. He took my wallet, my phone, and my keys. Then he slammed my head once into the ground and ran into the trees. I lay there stunned, blood in my mouth, gravel pressing into my palms. I wasn't unconscious, but I wanted to be. I forced myself up. My keys and phone were gone, my ribs bruised. I limped 2 blocks and banged on our neighbor Ethan's door. He opened eyes wide. "Jesus, what happened?" he asked. A masked guy came out of the trees. "He hit me. Took everything," I said, in pieces. Ethan called the police while I tried to breathe through the pain. The officers arrived and listened, polite but cautious. "Do you have the texts?" one asked. I had no phone, so Ethan logged into my cloud and pulled them up. Her message was calm. "Please, I really need to talk to you. Pinebrook Park, 10 p.m. "She lured you there," the officer said. "It seems so," I replied. "She'd picked the place, disappeared, and then this man attacked." They asked about her history. "Any reason to think she'd do something like this before?" An officer wrote, "No," I said. But she had a temper and didn't handle the breakup well. 3 days later, they arrested Kira and a man named Trevor Hensley. Trevor wasn't gone like she'd said. He'd been here. Detectives said Kira had fed him a story about me, that I'd used her, lied, betrayed her. Whatever she told him convinced him to help. He waited in the trees. She baited me. The rest happened as they planned. Kira admitted some involvement, called it a scare that went too far. She never apologized. They never found my phone, wallet, or keys. "They were dumped," a detective said. I replaced what I could. I changed the locks, installed cameras, and stopped walking after dark. For weeks I flinched at every sound. Dates felt hollow. I stopped answering X's after sunset. What haunts me most isn't the tackle or the punches or the masked face. It's the calmness of her text. "Please, I really need to talk to you." Like she cared, like she didn't know I would be bleeding on the ground 10 minutes later. Once trust is broken that badly, even sunlight looks suspicious. No lock, no cop, no apology can fix that. After the arrests and the police interviews, life felt fragile, as though I might crack at any sudden sound. I replayed her text endlessly. How ordinary it sounded, like a friend asking to meet for coffee. People told me to be practical, change locks, get cameras, see a therapist. Ethan camped on my couch a few nights until I could sleep without jumping at shadows. I started waking with my heart racing, imagining footsteps in the yard. Sometimes I dreamed the park with the trees leaning in closer and alone. I never believed in ghosts. Not out of arrogance or a deathbed commitment to logic. It was simpler. Nothing supernatural had ever touched my life. No haunted mirrors, no soft voices in empty rooms, no eyes catching the light in the dark. My days were reliably dull in the best way. Wake, eat, bike to university, do my shift at the bookstore, go home. I lived in Fairbridge, a small riverside town in the south of New Zealand. Mist-blanketed mornings, drooping willows along narrow streets, neighbors who knew every dog by name. My dad, Robert Marsh, had been a school teacher and now kept the house tidy the way teachers do. Ours was an old place 5 minutes from the river. Comforting creeks, familiar smells, predictable dinners. That predictability snapped the moment I met Claire Morgan. We crossed paths the summer before my 3rd year. I was 20, pulling the evening shift at a second-hand shop called Spine and Paper. arranging battered spines under the tired lamp. Claire came in wearing a vintage gray coat that looked like it belonged in a photograph, black boots and a scarf wound tightly despite the mild air. She had that old-fashioned cut about her, 50s or 60s maybe, and she didn't smile. She didn't look at me properly, just said, "Do you have anything on lucid dreaming?" Her voice was small but sure, and for reasons I couldn't name, I wanted her to linger. She did. Over a few slow visits, we moved from dreams to music to the fact she loathed modern gadgets and still used a flip phone. She was odd in a way that felt compelling, like a book with a worn, unreadable cover. After 3 weeks, I asked if she fancied coffee. She said yes without hesitation. That was our beginning. Our first date was quiet in a way I'd never had before. We walked beside the river at sunset. The light went dull and gold. Claire rarely spoke, but when she did, her words were measured, like she was cutting through a thought midstream. "I used to sleepwalk," she said, watching the water pull at the reeds. "My parents would find me outside just staring." I laughed, thinking it an innocent confession, but she didn't smile. "That's creepy," I said. She turned to me dead serious. It was. Maybe I was attracted to the mystery. Maybe I was simply lonely. I hadn't dated since high school. Claire was beautiful in an old-world way. Long, dark hair, pale skin, and the peculiar effect of never wearing makeup yet seeming somehow ethereal. We started spending more time together. She disliked crowds and avoided pubs and restaurants. She preferred quiet parks, empty fields, and my house. At first it felt intimate, like being the only two people left on Earth. The oddities crept in slowly. Claire never let me see her home. She called it too messy, and I never saw a photo. No socials, no parents introduced, no friends I could meet. Things you shrug off when you're 30 and hopeful. One summer night we lay on the grass behind our place. The town's distant hum softened, the sky scattered with stars. She said, almost a whisper, "Do you think souls can split?" I assumed she meant it figuratively. People losing themselves, halves of identity tucked away. "Like people not knowing who they are?" I offered. She turned to me. "No, literally. What if part of someone stayed behind?" I didn't press. At the time, I thought it poetic. Maybe the residue of a trauma. Looking back, I should have asked more. I didn't. It was early October. Claire had stayed late at my place. Around 11:30, she said she wanted to walk home. I offered to walk her halfway, and she refused with a small smile. "No one's out this late," she said. "It's peaceful." I watched her fade into the street under a flickering lamp. 15 minutes later, something jolted me awake. Not a phone, not a call, but a knock at my bedroom window facing the backyard. I froze, breath shallow. Drawing the curtain aside, the garden held only its usual shadows. Nothing there. A coldness crept from my chest to my fingers. Then my phone buzzed. "Claire, I need you to come to the river now, please." No punctuation, no capitals, a single urgent string. I didn't bother changing out of my pajamas. The river was a short run through a hollowed path behind the old community hall. Routes I knew better than the lines on my palm. That night the air felt thick, as if the darkness itself had weight. The moon threw a strange metallic sheen across the water. When I stepped into the clearing by the river, she was there. Claire by a tree at the edge, her head bowed, hair spilling like a blind. "Claire," I said, a voice I tried to steady. No answer. I took another step, then one more. She lifted her face slowly, and I swear to God my stomach turned inside out. It wasn't Claire, or it was, but not all the way. Her skin had a bluish pallor, like she'd been kept underwater too long. Her eyes were glassy and empty, and blood threaded down the corner of her mouth. I stumbled back until the grass bit my shins. "Claire, what the hell? Are you okay?" I heard my voice, and it sounded small and stupid. She didn't move. Then, without her lips forming a sound, a voice filled my head. "Don't uncover me." The room tilted. The next thing I knew, everything went black. I woke in my own bed, filthy and disoriented. My pajamas were slick with river mud. My hands still trembled as if I'd been running. In the kitchen, my dad, Robert, flicked pages of the paper like he had done every morning for 20 years. The normality of it sank like an accusation. My phone showed no messages from Claire. Calling her went straight to silence, dead line. I grabbed my bike and pedaled to Spine and Paper before my head cleared. Maybe she'd turned up at work. Maybe this was some awful joke. Nothing. No Claire at the counter. No note. I asked around campus, texted people who might have seen her. Nobody had. The day blurred. Hours smooshed together like wet paper. Every familiar street felt slightly off-kilter. That night I dreamed her again. The same posture by the river, hair like a blind, voice like a rasp. You saw too much. The next morning I handed the police a statement. Detective Michael Lane listened, polite but distant. When I finished, he looked at me with that careful skepticism detectives learn. "Are you sure she exists?" he asked. "No phone number, no address, no photos? You said she doesn't use social media." I felt my jaw clench. "She exists," I said, firmer than I felt. "We've been seeing each other for nearly 2 months." He made a note and promised to check, but his eyes said the same thing the others had. "Maybe you're misremembering. Maybe you made her up." Nobody believed me, so I started to look into what no one else seemed curious about. The river, the tree where I'd found her, the patch of land that had felt older than the town itself. I sat in the library until the lights dimmed, ran microfilm reels, scanned brittle council minutes, and found a clipping from 1964. "Local woman drowns after alleged possession," the headline read. "Family denied witchcraft claims." The name under the grainy photo was Clara Morgan. The face in the black and white print was shockingly familiar. The same sharp jaw, the same high cheekbones. The article said townspeople found her nailed to a riverside tree, convinced she'd been possessed. They whispered she'd lured men into the woods at night, that some returned altered, some not at all. She was 22 when she died. Claire was 22. Sleep deserted me after that. Nights became a thin, watchful film of terror. Then around 2 in the morning there was a knock. Not the tentative tapping at my window this time, but hard, deliberate raps at the front door. I crept downstairs with a flashlight and flung the door open. Nothing but a single wet footprint pressed into the porch wood. I turned back toward the hall, and there she was. Claire standing barefoot on our doormat, dripping, the house light pooling around her. She shivered under the dripping coat, skin pale as the moonlight. My mouth went dry. I couldn't move. She took a step forward, and I felt every instinct scream at me to run, to lock every door, to never breathe the same air again. "Claire, what are you?" I managed, my voice a broken thing. Tears tracked clean lines down her cheeks. She looked right through me and said flatly, "I'm what they made me." Then she was gone. Not a slow fade, but an abrupt absence, like someone had pulled the thread out from beneath the rug. 7 years have passed since that night. I left Fairbridge and therapy, a long, slow unpicking of the things that kept me there. Marriage, a job in Auckland. On paper, I'm ordinary. Appointments kept, a houseplant that refuses to die. But sometimes, late and quiet, I still hear a single knock. One sharp sound, then the universe holding its breath. When I walk near any river, the air prickles at the base of my neck as if someone has stepped in my shadow. I don't turn. I never look back, because every instinct in me knows that if I do, she will come home with me. I never thought I'd see her again. That isn't me being dramatic, and it's not the start of a spooky campfire tale. I mean it in the most literal sense. 3 years had passed. No texts, no awkward run-ins, no mutual friends who even mentioned her name. She wiped herself clean from every social media profile. For all I knew, she could have left the country, or worse. Either way, she was gone from my life. Her name was Malene Quinn. 3 years ago, she and I were inseparable. We met in this dim little dive bar out in Henderson, just off the Las Vegas Strip, the kind of place with sticky floors and a jukebox that only worked half the time. She wasn't just pretty, she was magnetic, quirky in a way that felt dangerous but exciting. She'd show up at my apartment at midnight with sushi she barely afforded and a disposable camera saying, "I want to keep us forever, frame by frame." For 5 months we burned like gasoline on an open flame, and then just as quickly it turned to ash. At first it was subtle. She started texting constantly, dozens of messages before lunch demanding little reassurances. "Do you still love me?" she'd ask over and over. "Are you sure I'm enough?" If I didn't answer fast enough, her eyes would gloss with tears, sometimes even at dinner in the middle of a crowded restaurant. It wasn't just neediness. It was something darker, something that felt like obsession tightening its grip. When I finally broke things off, I tried to do it gently, thinking maybe kindness could cushion the blow. But the damage had already rooted itself in her. Her last words to me, sent as a text the day we split, still crawl under my skin when I remember them. Take care, honey. Let's meet in 3 years. I'll be better then. And that was it. She blocked me, changed her number, moved out of her apartment, erased herself completely like smoke dissolving into the Vegas wind. Life carried me forward. I wasn't the same 20-something kid anymore. I'd just turned 30. Work was steady. I'd been promoted at my downtown tech job. I was dating someone new, Erin. She was a nurse at Sunrise Hospital, grounded and warm in ways Malene never was. We talked about moving in together, maybe finding a small place in Summerlin with more sunlight than my current apartment. Things felt good, stable, like my life was finally aligning, until one Thursday night in late September. The kind of desert night when the air feels bone dry but the sky holds this weird electric charge. I was half asleep on the couch, game muted on the TV, when I heard it. A knock. Not the doorbell. An actual knock. Slow, rhythmic, hesitant, almost like the person was testing the sound. I got up, rubbing sleep out of my eyes, assuming it was a late delivery. But when I opened the door, my chest went hollow. It was her. Malene. My brain stuttered. I actually stumbled backward like I was staring at a ghost. But the shock wasn't just that she had found me after all this time, it was what she looked like. Her face was a nightmare version of itself. Her jaw seemed to cave inward unnaturally, like bone had been stolen from her. Her nose jutted forward, sharp as glass, wrong against the rest of her features. Her cheekbones stretched her skin taut, making it look too thin, almost translucent. And her eyes, once soft hazel, eyes I used to kiss shut, were wide and rigid, as though her eyelids had been pulled back and pinned there. The only proof it was truly her was the tattoo curling across her neck in delicate cursive. You have to love me. I remembered sitting beside her in that tattoo parlor, drunk and laughing when she'd whispered, "Now you can't ever forget me." She stared into me without blinking. Then with a suddenness that snapped the air, she lunged, her hands, icy like they'd just come from a freezer, clamped around my throat. Her voice tore through her warped mouth, shrill and slurred. "Do you love me now? How do you like my face? Tell me you love me." Her words bent sideways, twisted as if her tongue didn't fit properly anymore. Panic overtook instinct. I shoved her hard, slamming the door closed, my breath ragged. Her fist began pounding against the wood, frantic and heavy. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped my phone, dialing 911. I stammered through the explanation, barely coherent, when the police arrived. Fast as Vegas cops usually do, even they seemed unsettled. They found her still outside my door, no longer screaming, just muttering quietly to herself. They later told me she'd been staying at a cheap motel not far from downtown and had been spotted wandering near my office building. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, replaying her face, her voice, her hands gripping me. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Harlan with LVMPD. His tone was calm, practiced, but I could hear the unease threaded through it. He told me they had pieced together parts of her recent life. Over the last 3 years, Malene had undergone more than 100 unlicensed plastic surgeries. Fake names, cash only, border towns, Mexico. The operations weren't just cosmetic. Whatever they were chasing, it wasn't beauty anymore. It was something else entirely. They weren't ordinary surgeries. They were extreme, beyond anything a sane doctor would ever recommend. Bone shaving, forced widening of her eyes, jaw dislocation and reconstruction, cartilage grafts stretched into grotesque shapes. Some of the procedures were outlawed years ago because of how dangerous they were, and yet she'd gone through with them willingly, repeatedly. One surgeon later told investigators that she would arrive with clippings and photos, celebrities, porcelain mannequins, anime characters, even glossy pictures of Barbie dolls, and beg him to make her perfect. When asked why, she gave the same answer every time. He said he didn't love me, but if I'm perfect, he will. 3 nights later, I found a note left neatly on my porch. No envelope, no attempt to hide it, just folded paper, placed as if she knew I'd see it before I even left for work. The handwriting was hers, shaky, looping letters I'd memorized years ago. Please come to my place one last time. Then I'll leave you forever. Address 1451 Wesley Avenue, Unit B, North Las Vegas. I should have torn it up. I should have burned it, deleted the address from my mind, and called the police immediately. but instead curiosity festered. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe the idea of closure pulling at me like a hook. Against every instinct screaming in my gut, I went. The duplex was tucked behind an old laundromat that hadn't buzzed with machines in decades. The building sagged with rot, its paint the color of cigarette ash, windows smeared with years of desert dust. My car looked out of place parked against the curb. The door to Unit B was ajar. The sun was setting, casting fractured light through the jagged hills, stretching shadows long and skeletal across the cracked sidewalk. I hesitated, then knocked softly. No answer. "Meline?" I called, my throat dry. Movement flickered in the living room. A silhouette. A woman's figure, tall and perfectly still beneath the glow of a single hanging bulb. My heart thundered against my ribs as I stepped inside. "Meline?" My voice cracked, then a voice answered. "Do you love me now?" It didn't come from the figure. It came from behind it. The thing in the light wasn't human. It was a life-sized Barbie doll. Blonde synthetic hair gleamed in strands. The plastic mouth was frozen into a wide, painted smile. Its eyelids bore sewn-on human lashes, and cheap acrylic nails had been glued to its stiff hands. Makeup caked across its plastic face, and its glassy eyes, they looked wet, glossed over, almost alive. Meline stepped out from behind it. She gripped the doll's hand like it was her partner, and in her other hand gleamed a kitchen knife. Her face was more ruin than skin now, lips split raw, stretched too thin by endless surgeries. Her eyes burned with a fevered intensity. "It's not the looks, right?" she rasped, voice trembling. "It's the heart. That's what matters, isn't it?" She advanced, at first slow, swaying almost, then suddenly lunged, dragging the doll with her as if presenting it to me. "Love me now," she screamed, her voice splitting into something inhuman. "Love me, or I'll put your heart inside her." The knife slashed the air. I dodged, but the blade kissed my arm, splitting skin. Pain shot through me, white and hot. I staggered backward, adrenaline kicking in, and bolted out the door. My feet barely touched the ground as I tore across the yard into the street, blood dripping down my sleeve. A neighbor saw me, panic in my eyes, and called 911 before I could even explain. That night, they arrested her. When police searched the house, they found 6 more dolls scattered in various states of assembly. Each one had been styled differently. Different hair, clothes, painted faces, but all were marked with names scrawled on tags. Perfect Meline. Love version 3, Angel Girl. The worst discovery, though, was the journal under her mattress. Hundreds of pages written in red ink repeating a single sentence. "He'll love me if I become everything." They also found surgical tools laid out with disturbing precision, and taped to the wall one note: "If I can't have his love, I'll build a body that will." The official diagnosis came weeks later: a severe psychiatric collapse, a cocktail of body dysmorphic disorder, delusional obsession, and a fixation so consuming it erased every piece of the person I once knew. Meline was committed to a psychiatric facility indefinitely. I moved not long after. I couldn't stay in Vegas, not with every street corner whispering her name. Erin tried, she really did, to help me rebuild, but I withdrew. The trauma was deeper than I expected. Sleep brought visions of the doll's glossy smile, the way its fake skin caught the light. Sometimes I'd wake up choking, feeling her cold hands on my throat again. People say love makes you do crazy things, but obsession isn't love. It's a hunger that consumes both the person who feels it and the one trapped in its grasp. Meline believed my love was the only cure for her emptiness, and to fill that void, she tore herself apart, then tried to tear me apart too. I never thought I'd actually speak these words out loud, let alone write them down. Not because I was hiding anything, but because even now it refuses to make sense, not to me, not to anyone. And if I can't understand it myself, how could I expect someone else to? Still, I feel like I have to try. Maybe not for sympathy, but for the chance that putting it into words might bring some clarity. It began 2 years ago, back when I was living in Leeds. I had just landed a job at a marketing firm, which felt like a huge step up from the aimless part-time gigs I'd been dragging myself through after uni. I'd finally left my shared student flat and moved into a small one-bedroom, still adjusting to the dull rhythm of proper adulthood, paying bills, catching crowded buses to work, writing grocery lists I never stuck to. Nothing remarkable. That was when Maya came into my life. Like most people these days, we met on an app. Her profile was minimalist. A handful of casual photos, dark wavy hair tumbling loose, a black hoodie, a paperback balanced in her hand, messy bun threatening to collapse. She looked at ease with herself. No forced smiles, no curated perfection. Her bio read, "True crime addict, night owl, coffee snob. Be interesting or be ignored." We matched, started chatting, and within a week we agreed to meet. She picked the Royal Park pub near Hyde Park. Even over text, she was quick, witty, her sarcasm cutting in a way that made me laugh. In person, she was the same. Charming, dry, sharp in a way that sometimes caught me off guard. We clicked, no hesitation. For about 5 months, we dated. It wasn't exactly serious, not in the meet the parents sense, but it wasn't casual either. We spent most weekends together, developed private jokes that made no sense to anyone else, spammed each other with memes and ridiculous late-night voice notes. She could be intense, though. If I didn't reply fast enough, I'd get these half-joking messages. "Guess you died, Ripey, let me know when the funeral is." The first few times I laughed, but later it started to feel heavier, like the joke had teeth. Eventually, things began to burn out. Her possessiveness tightened just as I started pulling back. Strangely, the breakup was the calmest moment we ever had together. We met at a Costa near the University of Leeds, ordered flat whites, and sat across from each other. There was no fight, no accusations, just quiet resignation. "Still friends?" she asked, sipping her coffee without looking at me. "Yeah, sure," I said, and I meant it, or thought I did. After that, we drifted. A text here or there, usually nothing more than a quick check-in. Months passed. Then 7 months later, in late August, my phone buzzed. I'd just returned from a short trip to Manchester, tired and ready for a quiet night. The screen lit up. Maya. Her message read, "Hey random, but can I ask you something weird?" I hesitated, then typed back, "That depends." She replied almost instantly, "I'm in a bit of a situation. I have to move out of my flat, but my new lease doesn't start for 5 days. Could I crash at yours? Just until then?" I stared at it for a long time. We hadn't really spoken in months, so why me? My first instinct was suspicion, but that softer part of me, the one that hates conflict and can't quite say no, took over. "Yeah. Couch," I typed. Her response came with alarming speed. "Absolutely. You're a lifesaver." I told myself it was temporary. I was working long hours anyway. We'd barely see each other. She arrived the following evening, 2 bags slung over her shoulder, a faint smile tugging at her mouth. She wore her usual plain black hoodie and jeans, hair tied back in the same careless knot. "Hey, stranger," she said, stepping inside as though she'd never left. "Hey, welcome back." "I guess," I half joked. We caught up briefly in the kitchen. Jobs, disastrous dates, weird flatmates. She laughed the way she always had, tilting her head slightly, covering her mouth with her hand as though she didn't trust her own laughter to stay quiet. For a moment, it felt normal. A little awkward, yes, but bearable. I set her up on the couch with a spare duvet and pillow. She thanked me with a small smile, then settled in with a book. I excused myself, retreating to my bedroom. As I closed the door, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That night, I went to bed around 11. Sleep came easily. My body still ached from the drive back from Manchester, but sometime in the night I stirred. Not because of a sound exactly. It was subtler than that. A shift in the air, a pressure in the dark. The kind of feeling you get when you're sure you're not alone. I woke to the sensation of being watched. My eyes opened, and there she was, Maya, standing at the foot of my bed. She didn't move, didn't speak. The room was almost completely dark, but faint stripes of streetlight pushed through the blinds, enough to carve her silhouette from the shadows. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, hoping I was still dreaming. But I wasn't. I could see her face clearly, and it wasn't blank. It was furious. Not just furious, poisoned, hateful, as if I'd done something unforgivable. "Maya," I whispered, my throat dry. She didn't flinch. Didn't even breathe as far as I could tell. "You okay?" My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. Silence. I sat up slowly, trying not to spook her. She took one step back, then turned away. Without a word, she slipped out, closing the door behind her as softly as if she were tucking me in. I stayed frozen for minutes, heart hammering so loudly it felt like the only sound in the room. Eventually, I forced myself to explain it away. She must have been sleepwalking, or maybe she'd had a nightmare, gotten confused, wandered in here by mistake. I didn't know. All I knew was it had happened. I hadn't imagined it. The next morning, over the sound of cereal hitting my bowl, I tried to sound casual. "Hey, did you come into my room last night?" She looked up from her phone, frowning. "What? No. You're sure? You didn't sleepwalk or anything?" She laughed, shaking her head. "I've never sleepwalked in my life." I forced a smile, shrugged like it was nothing. But that night I barely slept. The second night was worse. I jolted awake around 2 a.m., heart already racing, body stiff like it had been expecting something. The end of the bed was empty. But in the doorway, just her head peeking in. Her eyes locked on mine. Same expression. That sharp, unblinking malice. I froze. Neither of us moved. We just stared at each other for what felt like forever, though it couldn't have been more than 10 seconds. Then she disappeared. I stayed rigid, watching the doorway. A minute passed and her face appeared again, slow, deliberate. "Maya," I said louder this time. She pulled back. The door shut quietly. I didn't close my eyes again until the sun came up. The following day, she told me her new flat was ready earlier than expected. She packed her things quickly, barely making eye contact. "Thanks again," she said at the door, giving me a smile that looked perfectly normal. "You're a good one." And then she was gone. I should have felt relief. I didn't, because that was when the truly strange things began. A week later, I came home from work and found a note on my kitchen counter. Just one line scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. "You don't lock your windows very well. Might want to start." No signature. No explanation. My skin crawled. I checked every window, every latch, but nothing looked forced. I told myself maybe I'd left one open by mistake. That had to be it. But then came the texts. From an unknown number. "Still sleeping? Okay. I miss watching you." I changed my number immediately. It didn't stop there. I started noticing things moved around in my flat. Drawers I hadn't opened, a coffee mug sitting in the sink that I hadn't used. My toothbrush damp before I'd brushed. Each detail felt small, deniable, but together they hollowed me out. And then the worst. One night, coming home late, I flicked on my bedroom light and froze. My pillow was soaked. Not with water. It looked like spit. That was the breaking point. I moved out the next day, found a place across the river in Kirkstall, told only a handful of close friends. Months went by. No messages. No notes, nothing. Until one night, walking home from a late shift, I saw her. The street was empty, the air biting cold. Under a lamppost across the road, Maya stood watching. Perfectly still. She didn't call out. Didn't follow. Just stared as I walked past. I didn't say a word. Didn't look back. I never saw her again. Even now, I don't know what was real and what wasn't. I never reported it. I had nothing to show, no proof, no video, no witnesses. Just memory, just that terrible certainty. Because I know what I saw in her eyes. She wasn't looking at me like I was a person anymore. She was looking at me like prey. Always thought the worst someone could do in a relationship was lie or cheat. That was before Olivia. It didn't begin like a nightmare. If anything, those first weeks were some of the happiest of my life. I'd just moved to Portland after dropping out of college in Eugene. 19, tired, directionless, sleeping on my cousin's couch while I tried to find work. Darren, my cousin, introduced us one rain-slicked night as we waited in line outside a bar that didn't bother checking IDs. "She's a friend of a friend," Darren said, casual as ever. She was chill, smart, a little weird in the way that felt like an interior you wanted to sit in. I was hooked before I knew why. Olivia wasn't loud or flashy. No one stopped in the street to stare. But there was a calm intensity about her. Deep hazel eyes that watched like they were cataloging you. Thick black hair knotted into a messy bun. A black leather jacket thrown over a faded Bauhaus t-shirt. She had secrets written into the curve of her shoulders, and I wanted every one of them. We clicked too fast. She laughed at the jokes I barely remembered making. She listened like she was carving me into something she could keep. I told her things I hadn't told anyone. Not Darren, not my high school best friend. 2 weeks later, I was sleeping at her place most nights. A third-floor corner unit in Buckman with creaky floors, thin walls that hummed with the city, and paint peeling in places that somehow made the apartment feel older and more intimate rather than ruined. At first, everything felt right. Olivia had routines, odd little rituals that I told myself were part of her charm. Every Sunday, she went to a shop on Hawthorne called the Wild Thistle. Herbs, crystals, candles, books with titles like Blood Magic, The Red Path, Transference of Will. I used to picture the other girls in Portland clutching vintage novels and quartz, and I smiled at Olivia's quirks. She never pushed anything on me, not overtly, but as we spent more time together, I'd find myself drifting into her orbit. She didn't like mirrors. When I moved in, she asked me to cover mine because it reflected too much energy. She hated loud music. Suddenly, my playlists were off limits. Black candles and sage lived on the windowsill. She would light them and whisper to the smoke like it was an old friend. Sometimes she'd sit cross-legged on the floor at 2 a.m, writing in a thick leather-bound journal covered in symbols I couldn't read. The apartment smelled of wax and wet wood and a green, bitter herbal smoke I couldn't name. And I stayed. I told myself it was artistic, that love made you soft around the edges and willing to excuse strange things. 2 months in, she asked me to dye my hair black. I laughed, thinking she was teasing. "You'd look more aligned," she said, totally serious. I didn't know what aligned meant. I wanted to make her happy. So I went to the drugstore and came back with a box of dye. Then she suggested I grow a beard, said it would ground me. Then she swapped out my clothes, dark layered pieces that swallowed me, odd jewelry she made me wear until the metals left tiny impressions on my skin. Little by little, piece by piece, I felt myself change. My voice slowed. I started speaking quieter, not because she told me to, but because she looked at me differently when I did. When I laughed less, she smiled like a person who'd coaxed out the shape they wanted. Darren noticed before I did. One evening over coffee, he squinted at me. "Bro, you good?" he asked. "You look like you haven't slept in a month. Your vibe's off." I shrugged because admitting the hollow was admitting I'd let it happen. I couldn't articulate the way it felt like being in a body that belonged to someone else, like watching a replay of my life where the actor made oddly different choices. The worst part was that, even knowing something was wrong, I didn't care enough to run. On a rainy Tuesday, Darren turned up at our building soaked and shivering. Olivia had always said Darren gave her strange feelings. We stopped inviting him around and I ignored his texts. He let himself in anyway. "Thought you moved or something," he said, standing in the hallway, water beading on his jacket. "Want coffee?" I asked because the gesture felt normal. He blinked. "Since when do you drink coffee?" "You used to hate hot drinks." I couldn't meet his eyes. We sat and talked like visitors, small talk scraping the surface until Darren excused himself to use the bathroom. He took his time. When he came back, his face had gone pale. He leaned in, voice low. "Evan," he said, "what's in that back room? The one with the red curtain?" Something cold slipped under my ribs. "That's private," I muttered. He stared at me as if searching for the old cousin he knew. I saw something through the crack," he said. "I thought I was seeing things at first." He swallowed. "There are black candles arranged in a circle on the floor, wax melting down into strange shapes. There's a low chair with a bunch of photographs pinned to a board and herbs tied in bundles. Wild thyme, sage, something that smells like metal. Symbols painted on the walls like the ones in her journal. And," he hesitated, voice strangled, "there's a mirror face down with cloth torn around it and a small altar. Books, your name written on a scrap of paper. The whole room smells like smoke and something else I can't place." I listened to him list the things I'd half noticed and willfully ignored. He described it exactly. I always thought the worst someone could do in a relationship was lie or cheat. That was before Olivia. It didn't begin like a nightmare. If anything, those first weeks were some of the happiest of my life. I'd just moved to Portland after dropping out of college in Eugene. 19, tired, directionless, sleeping on my cousin's couch while I tried to find work. Darren, my cousin, introduced us one rain-slicked night as we waited in line outside a bar that didn't bother checking IDs. "She's a friend of a friend," Darren said. Casual as ever, she was chill, smart, A little strange in that appealing interior way. I was hooked before I knew why. Olivia wasn't loud or flashy. No one stopped in the street to stare. But there was a calm intensity about her. Deep hazel eyes that seemed to catalog everything. Thick black hair twisted into a messy bun. A battered leather jacket thrown over a faded Bauhaus t-shirt. She looked like someone who held her own stories close, and I wanted them. We clicked too fast. She laughed at jokes I barely remembered making. She listened like she was carving something real out of every word. I told her things I hadn't told anyone. Not Darren, not my old friends. 2 weeks later, I was sleeping at her place most nights. A third-floor corner unit in Buckman with creaky floors, thin walls that hummed with the city, and paint peeling in places that somehow made the apartment feel intimate rather than ruined. At first, it felt right. Olivia had routines. Small rituals I told myself were part of her charm. Every Sunday, she went to a shop on Hawthorne called the Wild Thistle. Herbs, crystals, candles, books with titles like Blood Magic, The Red Path, Transference of Will. I pictured the other girls in Portland clutching vintage novels and quartz and smiled at Olivia's quirks. She never pushed anything on me outright, but as we spent more time together, I drifted into her orbit. She didn't like mirrors. When I moved in, she asked me to cover mine because it reflected too much energy. She hated loud music. Suddenly, my playlists felt intrusive. Black candles and sage lived on the windowsill. She would light them and whisper to the smoke like it was an old friend. Sometimes she'd sit cross-legged at 2 a.m, writing in a thick leather-bound journal covered in symbols I couldn't read. The apartment smelled like wax and wet wood and a green, bitter herbal smoke I couldn't name. And I stayed. I told myself it was artistic, that love made you soft and willing to excuse odd things. 2 months in, she asked me to dye my hair black. I laughed, then did it. "You'd look more aligned," she said, as if that explained everything. I didn't know what aligned meant, but I wanted to make her happy. She suggested I grow a beard next. It will ground you. And then replaced my bright shirts with heavy dark layers and strange jewelry she made me wear until the metals left faint impressions on my skin. Little by little, I felt myself change. My voice quieted. I began speaking slower. Not because she told me to, but because she looked at me differently when I did. When I laughed less, she smiled like someone who'd coaxed out the shape they wanted. Darren noticed before I did. Over coffee, he squinted at me. "Bro, you good? You look like you haven't slept in a month. Your vibe's off." I shrugged because admitting the hollow was admitting I'd let it happen. I couldn't explain the feeling of being inside a body that wasn't entirely mine, like watching someone else live my life. The worst part was that even knowing something was wrong, I didn't care enough to run. On a rainy Tuesday, Darren turned up at our building soaked and shivering. Olivia had always said Darren gave her strange feelings. We stopped inviting him around and I ignored his texts. He let himself in anyway. "Thought you moved or something," he said, water beading on his jacket. "Want coffee?" I asked because the gesture felt normal. He blinked. "Since when do you drink coffee? You used to hate hot drinks." We talked like guests, small talk scraping the surface until Darren excused himself to use the bathroom. He took his time. When he came back, his face had gone pale. He leaned in, voice low. "Evan," he said. "What's in that back room? The one with the red curtain?" Something cold slid under my ribs. "That's private," I said. He stared like he wanted to find the old cousin he knew. I saw there are black candles in a circle on the floor, wax dripping into weird shapes. There's a low chair with photographs pinned to a board, bundles of herbs, wild thyme, sage, something metallic, symbols on the walls like the ones in her journal, a mirror turned face down, cloth wrapped around it, an altar, books, and your name on a scrap of paper. He described it exactly, the things I'd half noticed and then ignored. My hands started to shake. She's got a pentagram painted on the hardwood, black candles at each point, a bowl filled with ash and what looked like teeth, and something in the center, stone slab or altar, Darren said, voice barely a whisper. My throat closed. I remembered Olivia telling me never to go in there. "You've never seen it?" he asked. I shook my head. Then Olivia came in like she'd been expecting him. She didn't scream or flinch. She looked at Darren the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they own. "You weren't invited," she said, calm as a closed door. Darren stood up, furious. "You've been doing things to him," he said. He's not himself. She smiled, small and pleasant. He's more himself than he's ever been. Then she turned to me. Don't listen to him. He wants to pull you away. He wants to break the circle. There was something in her voice, low, measured as if it were threaded with another rhythm, that snapped through me like glass. I looked at Darren, looked at her, and ran. We didn't get far. The front door jammed no matter how we yanked. The lock wouldn't give. Olivia stood at the end of the hallway, arms outstretched, eyes black as if reflections had been removed from them. A pressure crushed inside my skull, thoughts folding like paper. Darren grabbed a candle from a table and threw it at her. It shattered on the wall. "Get to the circle room," he shouted. We slammed the door behind us, and I planted myself in the center of the painted pentagram, trembling. My chest burned in the middle like heat under skin, something clawing to get out. "Ivan," Darren said, voice urgent, using the name only family used. "She's using that room to anchor something in you." I fell to my knees. Olivia screamed from the other side of the door, a sound too clean, too pleased. "Let him finish the transfer. He belongs to me now." Darren shoved a bookshelf against the door and turned to me. "We have to break the circle." Through the thin wall, I could hear Olivia's voice sliding into different tones, amused, patient. "Exactly," she said softly. "You think she cares what happens to you?" I grabbed at my shirt and dragged the fabric across one of the red lines. It smeared, paint tacky under my fingers, and then the room changed. The candle flames all blew out at once. The burning pressure in my chest vanished like someone switched off a light. Then came a howl, a scream that wasn't quite human, a pitch that made the windows vibrate. When we pried the door open, Olivia was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Darren didn't either. The next day, he drove me to a church. The priest listened without flinching, asked only if I felt whole again. I couldn't say. A few days later, I went back to the apartment to collect my things. It was empty. No sign of Olivia. The circle room was scrubbed. Fresh paint, the hardwood stripped clean like nothing had ever happened. It's been 2 years. I moved back to Eugene. I don't keep candles in the house anymore. I avoid mirrors after dark. Sometimes I still get that tiny spark in my chest, like an ember buried under breath, and it fades. Darren and I don't talk much about it. The silences are full of things we both refuse to name. I tried to find her online, no records, no social media. I asked the landlord. He swore the apartment had been vacant for months before I moved in. But I remember her every night. I dream of that room. The thick smell of burned herbs, the scrape of wax, her voice whispering in a language I don't know. And every morning I wake up terrified to check the mirror, because I am sure that one day I will turn and find her standing behind me, smiling. I was the kind of guy who barely existed in high school. If I wasn't in the back row of class doodling half-baked monsters in my notebook, or passed out with my hoodie pulled tight, I was outside pushing carts in the supermarket lot, just scraping together enough money to buy my own lunches. I didn't party. Nobody dragged me into things. I was background noise. Cedar Hill was the kind of town where nothing ever shifted. The same patchy farmland, the lazy river that barely moved, the streets where people recognized your dad before they even learned your name. And in the middle of that small, sleepy world was her, Kara Whitmore. To me, she wasn't just a person. She was a hurricane trapped in a glass globe, wild and impossible not to stare at. Everyone noticed her. The teachers tried not to, the guys couldn't help themselves. Even moms at open house would linger too long when she walked by. But it wasn't only her looks. It was the way she carried herself, like she'd seen more than this town could ever offer and was only drifting through our high school halls for a laugh. Me, I couldn't even meet her eyes. Across 4 years, I said exactly 0 words to her. Still, I watched. Not in some creepy stalker way. More like when you're freezing and you stare at a fire because you can't help needing the warmth. She always had a sketchbook, her hands stained with graphite. Someone told me once she planned to go to an art school in Chicago, open her own gallery. I never believed for a second that she'd stay trapped here. And time went on like it does. Graduation gone. I ended up cooking at this chain restaurant, Ember's Grill, stuck on the north end of town, slinging burgers, scrubbing fryers, invisible as ever. Until the night she walked in. It was a packed Friday, country music blaring too loud, and I was hustling drinks behind the bar for tips when I looked up and froze. Same sharp jawline, same almond-shaped eyes, but older now, 23 like me. And then she looked straight at me. "Kyle," she said. The glass in my hand nearly slipped. My name hadn't sounded like that in years, not from her mouth. Yeah, wow. "Kara," I stammered. She smiled. Not the polite, distant kind, but warm, almost familiar. "You're working here? That's crazy. You were in my class, right? You sat behind me in world history." My heart slammed against my ribs. How the hell did she remember that? Before I could respond, someone slid into the booth beside her. Ryan Wells, ex-football captain, broad grin, the kind of guy who never had to try. He nodded at me like we were old friends, but I saw the way Kara leaned toward him. It stung like hell. I forced small talk, took their order, and went back to the bar, but my brain didn't stop spinning all night. Over the next few weeks, she kept coming in. Sometimes with Ryan, sometimes with her friends, but once, just once, she came alone. That night, we really talked. She asked about my life, what I'd been up to. She told me she never made it to art school. Her mom had gotten sick and she'd stayed behind to help. Now she worked at her uncle's framing shop on Miller Street. We laughed about old teachers. She remembered I loved sci-fi novels. Even asked if I still drew. I lied and said yes, though I hadn't touched a pencil in years. Later that night, I went home, locked my door, buried my face in my pillow, and screamed like a kid. A week later, she came in again. Alone. No Ryan. She leaned across the counter, smirking. "You off soon?" Yeah, I said. "Why?" "You should come over. I want to show you something." I blinked, stunned. "Like, tonight?" She nodded. "Yeah, I've got wine and something you'll like. Trust me." Of course I said yes. She wrote down her address. A place off the old river road near the woods. A little isolated, but close enough. That night I drove over, my stomach in knots. Her house was small, one story, old but neat. The porch light flickered and the swing out front creaked in the wind. I knocked and she opened the door in a paint-stained sweatshirt and black jeans. "Kyle," she said, grinning. "Come in." The first thing I noticed was the floor. The entire living room was covered in sheets of clear plastic. My eyes caught on it and she followed my gaze. "Oh, ignore that," she said quickly. "I'm repainting tomorrow. Don't want to ruin the hardwood." "Right. Makes sense," I muttered, but my gut twisted. Then I saw the paintings. Framed canvases leaned against every wall. Men in anguish, men crying, men screaming. My chest tightened. One painting stopped me cold. A man with Ryan's exact face, eyes bulging, mouth dripping blood, his body crumpled mid-scream on the floor. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. She stepped beside me, calm, almost proud. "I call that one entropy. It's my best so far. Can't you feel it? The pain, the suffering?" Her voice shook, but it buzzed with a weird kind of joy. She was talking like she'd been listening to him complain for hours. How perfect his life was. The job in Chicago. The shiny car he bragged about. It felt almost casual when she said, "So I broke his jaw with a mallet." I remember how she described it, like she was fondly recalling a recipe. "Took forever to get the right scream," she said, eyes bright. "But eventually, he gave me what I needed." She smiled as if reciting a favorite line. I took a step back so fast I nearly hit the coffee table. "You're joking," I heard myself say. She tilted her head the way someone tests a note for pitch. "I'm not." There was something wrong with her then. Her pupils were blown wide, her hands jittered under the cuffs. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, like the world was vibrating a hair too fast for her to keep up. I moved toward the door without thinking, and she laughed, soft, almost amused, and very cold. "You haven't even seen the others." When I turned back, 4 more canvases faced me, each a study of a man I'd never known, and yet all of them twisted in some private, unforgettable torment. One crawled with painted spiders, another had limbs bound tight to ropes, a third froze in a mid-air fall with knives embedded in the back. "Art," she said, like teaching, "is purest when it's honest, and humans are only honest when they're dying." My mouth went dry, my knees felt like lead. She moved to the kitchen and then came back with something that did not belong in a living room. A medieval mace, frosty with age and heavy in her hands, the sort of thing you see behind glass in a museum. "Kyle," she said, voice syrupy, "it's your turn. I've been planning your painting for days." That was the last coherent second I had. I bolted. She swung the mace. It whooshed past my head, bit into the doorframe and splintered wood outward like rain. I went through the front door on a force I didn't know I had, slid on the plastic she'd taped to the porch, and tumbled down the steps. She screamed after me, "Come back! I haven't finished your portrait." Her voice unpeeled from the house like a curtain. I didn't stop running until the main road swallowed me. I called the police with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. They tore her place apart the next morning. They found blood in the tub. A locked freezer in the garage held 4 bodies. One was Ryan Wells. He'd been beaten to death with a hammer. The other 3 were drifters no one had filed missing. Out-of-towners, the kinds of people a town overlooks. Each corpse matched a canvas on her wall. They arrested her. 4 counts of first-degree murder. Life without parole. I didn't leave my bed for a week. I barely spoke. Sometimes I play that night back like a film and feel how thin the margin was. If I'd tripped on the plastic, if the lock had jammed, if I'd been slower, maybe I'd be one of her paintings now, frozen on a stretch of canvas. A masterpiece by her standards, but not anything worth pride. I don't draw anymore. Not after that. I don't want to know what lives behind a frame.